"You call this a gift?" Michael shouted, hurling the box straight at my face with a force I never believed he could use against his own father. The cardboard struck my left cheek and dropped to the floor with a heavy thud that echoed across the living room. Jessica smirked from the couch, clearly pleased, while the other guests froze, stunned by the cruelty they had just seen. "Dad, after all we've done for you, this is what you give us? Trash," he sneered, pointing to the fallen box as if it were worthless. My grandson Noah covered his mouth in shock, horrified at his father's outburst. What Michael didn't realize was that inside that plain box was the key to a $450,000 condominium I had secretly bought for him, working endless overtime and weekends for 2 years to save the money. But after that humiliation, after seeing only scorn in his eyes, I knew he had lost the right to ever discover what I was truly giving him. 3 months earlier, everything seemed ordinary in my Sunday routine. The dining table was set with the fine china I had inherited from my mother, glowing softly in the light slipping through the shutters. The smell of slow-roasted beef with vegetables filled the house, blending with the roses blooming in the garden. Michael arrived right on time, with Jessica and my dear Noah, who ran to hug me with the honesty only teenagers still carry. "Grandpa, it smells amazing," he whispered warmly. Jessica greeted me politely but coldly, though I sensed something sharper in her that day, something calculating that made me uneasy. At lunch, Michael kept roaming the house with strange attention. He got up again and again with silly excuses, checking the back door, seasoning his food, making sure the alarm was set. But I watched him carefully. I saw how he paused at the antique furniture, studied the family photos, even opened drawers under the pretense of closing them. "This house is far too big for you, Dad," he finally remarked, filling his wine glass. "At your age, you need something simple, not all this burden." Jessica eagerly agreed, adding, "Mr. Richard, you should really think about moving into a senior living place, somewhere safe, where you don't have to worry about chores or upkeep." The talk kept circling back to the same point. They spoke about senior homes, modern apartments, and how free I would feel without the burden of a big house. But in their tone I caught something else, an urgency dressed up as care that made every word feel wrong. Noah stayed quiet, barely touching his food, giving me silent looks when his parents weren't paying attention. It was as if he too sensed the hidden meaning behind their kind words. The afternoon sun dropped lower, throwing long shadows across the wooden floor, and those shadows felt like a warning of darker times to come. When they left that night, I washed the dishes with a heavy chest. The crystal glasses clinked softly as I scrubbed them, warm water running over hands hardened by decades of labor. For 45 years I worked in the automotive plant, clocking in at 5 a.m., even on weekends, saving every cent to give Michael the life I never had. I raised him alone after his mother abandoned us when he was just 8, swearing he would never go without. I worked double shifts, sold my baseball card collection, gave up every comfort to pay for his private university education. That night in my recliner with a hot cup of tea, small details I had ignored returned to me, questions about my papers, hints about spare keys, casual remarks about access to my accounts, just in case. Suddenly they all linked together like pieces of a dark puzzle. The lamp glowed against walls lined with family photos, reminders of years when love felt pure and unselfish. But those memories only deepened my unease. In the weeks after that dinner, Michael's visits grew more frequent and more calculated. He stopped showing up only on Sundays. Now he appeared during the week, always with a neat excuse. "I was near the office and thought to drop by. I was at Home Depot and wanted to check on you." Each visit seemed normal on the surface, but beneath it I began to see a disturbing pattern. Michael always came with Jessica, who would wander through the house pretending to stay busy while he kept me talking about my health, my medicines, and my daily habits. Jessica acted as if she cared about my books, but I caught her secretly taking photos of the titles, surely checking their value online later. Her sharp eyes studied every item like a professional appraiser listing valuables. One Tuesday afternoon, while I brewed coffee in the kitchen, I overheard her voice through the screen door. She was on the phone speaking in hushed tones. "The property is in excellent condition. The antiques alone are worth a fortune." He doesn't realize the true value of what he owns. My chest tightened and my hands trembled as I stirred cream into my mug, pretending I hadn't heard. When she stepped back inside, Jessica smiled at me with that fake warmth she had polished over years of marriage to my son. "Mr. Richard, you have such a lovely home. Truly beautiful," she said, running her fingers across the baby grand piano I had bought with my first promotion bonus 4 decades earlier. Just then Michael walked out of the powder room, frowning, and held up one of my pill bottles. "Dad, this blood pressure medicine expired 4 months ago," he said, waving it like proof of my carelessness. "This is dangerous. What if you had a stroke and nobody knew?" Jessica nodded seriously, adding, "Living alone at your age is risky, Mr. Richard. What if you slipped in the shower? What if you had a heart attack in the night?" Their words sounded concerned, but the tone was rehearsed, like lines from a play. The performance made my skin crawl. That afternoon, Noah came home from school, his backpack slung over his shoulder, his shirt wrinkled from the day. He hugged me warmly, but I could see him watching his parents closely, suspicion written across his face. Later, while we shared iced tea and homemade cookies, he suddenly broke the heavy silence. "Mum, why are you taking pictures of Grandpa's things?" The question hit like a thunderclap, dropping into the room in the middle of their small talk about the weather. Jessica's face flushed red, and she stammered excuses about documenting family heirlooms and saving memories. Michael quickly came to Jessica's defense. "Your mother just wants photos of Grandpa's house, so we'll have memories when he's gone," he explained smoothly. But Noah didn't believe him. His sharp eyes, so much like mine, stayed fixed on me, full of quiet doubt. That night, after they left, I walked through the house, checking every corner Jessica had touched. I opened drawers, inspected shelves, and went through the important papers in my desk. Nothing was missing, yet something felt wrong. The oak desk drawers sat slightly crooked, as if they'd been opened in a rush. My deed, my will, my investment statements, all still there, but arranged in a different order than I remembered. The change was small, but I knew my house too well to mistake it. Paranoia began to grow inside me like a weed. Every sound at night jolted me awake. Every unexpected call made my stomach tighten. Even surprise visitors filled me with dread. I started hiding my documents in new places every few days. I slipped the will into a cookbook, moved the deed into a shoebox in the closet, tucked investment papers under my mattress. I felt like a spy in my own home, guarding secrets I wasn't even sure anyone truly wanted to steal. One morning, while watering the flowers in my front yard, Mrs. Parker leaned over the white picket fence, lowering her voice as if sharing classified news. "Richard, I saw your daughter-in-law measuring the front of your house yesterday," she whispered. "She had a tape measure and a tablet. She was documenting everything." The hose shook in my hands, spraying water wildly over the flowers as I tried to keep calm. "Are you sure, Sarah?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Absolutely," she replied firmly, and she wasn't alone. There was an older man with her, dressed in a business suit. He looked like a contractor, or maybe a real estate appraiser. Her words hit me like ice. Jessica wasn't just snooping anymore. She had brought in a professional to evaluate the property, my garden, my renovations, my home, the place where I raised Michael, where I planned to spend the rest of my life, was being treated like merchandise to be sold. Everything was being listed and priced like items in a store. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was betrayal happening right in front of me, even as I tried to ignore the signs. The proof came in the most painful way. Noah showed up one Wednesday afternoon, his eyes red from crying, his hands trembling like dry leaves in the wind. "Grandpa, I need to tell you something serious," he whispered, quickly locking the door as if someone might be listening. He sat on the edge of the sofa, nervously twisting his fingers, searching for the right words. "I heard Mum and Dad last night. They think I was asleep. They're planning to get legal guardianship over you so they can take control of the house." His words hit me like heavy blows, shattering the calm of the living room where we had spent so many afternoons laughing, playing games, and telling stories. "Dad already spoke to an elder law attorney," Noah continued, his voice breaking. "He said they can file for conservatorship because you live alone, and sometimes you forget little things like where you leave your glasses or if you took your pills." Each word cut deep. Jessica had been quietly collecting every small slip of memory, every repeated story, every pause when I struggled to recall a name. What I saw as normal aging, she had twisted into evidence of weakness to use in court. Noah wiped his tears and whispered again, "Mom already picked the place where they want to send you. It's awful, Grandpa. Tiny rooms that stink of disinfectant, people just sitting in silence, staring at game shows all day." He admitted they had already toured it, pretending it was for the future, when in truth they had signed papers and even paid a deposit. "I heard Mum telling someone on the phone," Noah added, "that once you were moved into care, they could put your house on the market right away. Buyers always prefer it empty." The room spun around me as the truth sank in. My own son, the boy I had taught to ride his bike, held during storms, rushed to the hospital when he broke his arm, was now plotting to take not only my home, but my freedom and dignity as well. Jessica, the woman who had shared smiles at our family dinners for 15 years, had secretly been building a legal case to prove I was incompetent. It was a cold, calculated plan to rob me of everything I had worked for through decades of sacrifice. "But there's more, Grandpa," Noah whispered, his eyes darting nervously toward the windows, as if his parents might suddenly appear. "Dad already found a buyer for the house." My heart sank as he continued, "It's a developer. He wants to tear this place down and replace it with luxury townhomes." The thought crushed me. They didn't just want to steal my home, they wanted to erase it completely. Every room where I had raised my son, every wall that had held his laughter, every window where I had waited for his school bus, all of it would be destroyed, reduced to rubble for profit. That night, sleep never came. I wandered through the house in my robe, running my fingers across each piece of furniture, each photograph, every memory of my life. The piano where Michael once practiced, the dining table where we celebrated his milestones, the recliner where I held him when his mother walked out, all priceless to me, yet reduced to nothing but numbers on a real estate report. I stopped at the hallway mirror and saw a tired old man staring back, but behind those weary eyes was a fire I hadn't felt in years. At dawn, I made a decision. I put on my best navy suit, the one I saved for important days, carefully combed my silver hair, and drove to the credit union I had trusted for 35 years. "Richard, so good to see you," greeted Linda, the branch manager who had handled my accounts since Michael's college days. "I need to make a significant transaction," I told her firmly, laying out my documents on her desk. "I want to buy a condominium, and I need complete discretion." For the next 3 hours, Linda guided me through listings. At last, we found it, a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in the upscale Riverside district. Panoramic city views, walking distance to shops and medical care. The price was $450,000, exactly the amount I had saved over 5 years of overtime shifts, pension deposits, and selling my vintage Mustang collection. "It's perfect for someone beginning a new chapter," Linda said softly as she prepared the paperwork. She had no idea this purchase was not only for a new chapter, but the start of my revenge. What Linda didn't know was that I was setting in motion the most precise revenge of my life. That afternoon, I signed every document, feeling deep satisfaction with each stroke of my pen. The condo was placed in Michael's name, meant as a surprise gift for his upcoming birthday. I had pictured handing him the key inside a small gift box, imagining the happiness on his face when he realized his father, the man he thought he could fool, had bought him valuable property. But after discovering their plans, that same gift became the perfect weapon for a lesson he would never forget. Over the next weeks, my plan unfolded without a flaw. Whenever Michael and Jessica visited, I exaggerated my confusion, acting weaker than I really was. "Son, have you seen my car keys?" I'd ask while holding them in plain sight. Did I take my morning pills, even though the pill box was already empty? Jessica eagerly recorded everything on her phone, believing she was collecting proof of my mental decline. She had no idea each act was staged, designed to build their false confidence, while I prepared my counterattack. Michael's visits grew more frequent, almost daily, always with excuses. "Dad, I came to sort your medicine," he'd say, carefully checking bottles, counting tablets, pointing out expiration dates. "You could overdose if you're careless." I played along, nodding with fake gratitude, while watching him snap photos of every label. All of it fed into their guardianship plan. During one visit, Jessica hid a tiny recorder behind my law books while I was in the kitchen making coffee. She assumed I hadn't noticed, but I saw its reflection in the glass of my cabinet. That afternoon, she fired off harmless questions designed to make me seem confused. "Richard, do you know today's date? Can you recall your social security number? Where do you keep your financial statements?" I answered slowly with hesitation, fumbling just enough to sound uncertain. She looked pleased, convinced she was catching evidence of decline. My most powerful act came when I pretended not to know Noah during a visit. "Who is this nice young man?" I asked with a blank face, staring at my own grandson as if he were a stranger. "Who is this polite young man?" I asked with a blank, puzzled look, staring at my own grandson as if I had never seen him before. The pain in Noah's eyes was real, but when I gave him a small wink while his parents weren't watching, he understood instantly. "It's Noah, Dad, your grandson," Michael replied with forced patience, though I noticed the spark of triumph in his eyes. To him, this was the proof he had been waiting for, that I no longer had the sharpness to live on my own. That evening, from my bedroom window, I overheard Michael on the phone in the backyard. "Yes, Dr. Lewis, I think we have enough evidence now," he whispered, confident I was asleep. "He shows clear signs of dementia, confusion about people, places, and time. We even have audio recordings of his decline." That was when I learned who Dr. Lewis really was, a geriatric psychiatrist they had secretly hired to judge my mental state. They had arranged for him to visit the next week, pretending it was casual, but really it was a hidden evaluation of my competence. Meanwhile, I had begun my own counterplan. I had hired a different attorney, Robert King, a respected elder law expert who had already defended neighbors in similar battles. After hearing my full story, he said firmly, "Richard, what you're describing is elder abuse. But don't worry, we have legal tools to stop this." For hours we reviewed my estate papers, updated protections, and set up safeguards so no guardianship petition could succeed without full medical proof and a court hearing. Robert even helped me install hidden cameras across my home, tiny devices in the living room, kitchen, and dining room, nearly invisible but recording sound and video. "If your suspicions are right, we'll need undeniable evidence," Robert explained as he placed the last camera behind my antique mantel clock. "These recordings will show both your awareness and their deceit." And then the trap snapped shut. At a family barbecue, I faked another severe moment of confusion, asking again and again where I was and why strangers were in my house. Jessica leaned close to Michael, convinced I was completely lost. "This is perfect," she whispered. "Tomorrow we file for guardianship. With this proof, no judge will doubt he needs full supervision," Jessica whispered, unaware that my hidden cameras were recording every word of her early celebration. But the most crushing discovery came later, when I overheard Michael speaking to a property developer on the phone. "The house will be ready for sale in 60 days, he promised. "Once we secure guardianship, we can finalize the deal immediately. He won't have any right to interfere." The developer had already offered between $1 and $2 million. My home, my refuge, my legacy was nothing more than a business deal to them, spoken of with the coldness of traders selling stock. That night, as they celebrated their so-called victory, I sat quietly in my favorite leather chair, sipping chamomile tea, smiling for the first time in months. I had everything I needed: evidence, legal protection, and of course the key to the $450,000 condo I had bought for Michael. What was once a gift of love had now become the perfect tool to teach him a lesson he would never forget. Michael's birthday approached like a storm I had been waiting for. Every detail was carefully arranged, every step rehearsed. I invited everyone, our extended family, my brothers George and Joseph, cousins, neighbors, even colleagues from Michael's accounting firm. I wanted witnesses, many witnesses. This is a very special celebration, I told them. Tonight, I'm giving my son a gift he will remember for the rest of his life. And I meant every word. The dining room had never looked more beautiful. I set the heirloom tablecloth my mother had crocheted, polished the fine china from my wedding, and placed the crystal glasses I saved only for great occasions. Roses and jasmine from my garden filled the air with fragrance. It looked and smelled like a celebration of family love, though in truth it was the stage for a revelation that would shatter everything. Michael walked in beaming, wearing a sharp Italian suit, no doubt bought with the inheritance he was so sure of. Jessica followed, her usual rehearsed smile fixed in place, welcoming guests as though the house already belonged to her. "Richard has prepared something extraordinary for Michael," Jessica told anyone who would listen. "It's touching how a father never stops thinking about his children, no matter their age." Her words dripped with irony, an irony only I could fully understand. Noah arrived straight from soccer practice, his uniform stained with grass, and hugged me with that secret understanding we had built in recent weeks. He sensed something important was about to happen, though he didn't yet know the full scope of my plan. During dinner, I played the role of the proud father. I shared stories from Michael's childhood, praised his academic successes, and spoke about how proud I was to see him become a man of accomplishment. Guests smiled warmly, nodding, remarking on the strength of our bond and how blessed Michael was to have such a devoted parent. Jessica, of course, discreetly filmed parts of it with her phone, likely thinking she was gathering more proof of my supposed decline. An old man stuck in the past, clinging to memories with too much emotion. When it was time for presents, the room's energy shifted. Anticipation filled the air. The other guests had brought fine gifts: a leather briefcase, rare cologne, a first-edition book, a bottle of wine. Yet all eyes were fixed on me, curious about what I, the father they thought was slipping into incompetence, had prepared. "My gift is something very special," I announced, taking a small brown box from the side table, wrapped in a simple gold ribbon. "It's something I've worked on for a long time, something that carries the depth of my love for you, son." Michael took the box with a smile that barely hid his disappointment. I could see the flicker in his eyes, the irritation at its light weight, the plain wrapping, the lack of anything flashy. "Thanks, Dad," he muttered flatly, handling it as though it were an unwanted duty rather than a treasure. Jessica moved in closer, her calculating eyes fixed on the box, while the guests leaned forward eagerly, waiting for the mystery to unfold. "Go ahead, son," I said gently. "Open it. I believe you'll be surprised." Michael slowly untied the ribbon, dragging out the moment as if to show the crowd his lack of excitement. When he lifted the cardboard lid and peered inside, confusion spread across his face. Inside the box lay only a single brass key resting on folded white tissue. "A key?" Michael asked, holding it up between two fingers as if it were nothing. "Dad, what is this key even for?" His voice carried a sharp irritation he could barely hide. "It's the key to your new condominium," I answered calmly, enjoying the wave of confusion that swept over the room. "I bought a $450,000 condo in Riverside, fully furnished with stunning city views. It's yours, son." The silence that followed was so heavy you could hear the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Michael just stared at the key, unable to process it. Jessica's face drained of color, while guests whispered in shock at the generosity of my gift. But instead of joy or even surprise, Michael's expression hardened. Annoyance, even anger, twisted his face, as if what I offered him was a burden instead of a blessing. "Dad," he said tensely, "I didn't ask for a condo. I don't need one. Why would you spend that kind of money without talking to me first?" His reaction was exactly what I had feared and expected. To him, this wasn't love. It was interference, something that blocked his hidden plans for my house. He pressed further, his irritation growing. "How do we know this is even real? Do you have papers? Proof? Is this even legal?" Jessica quickly nodded, supporting his doubts. "Richard, it's possible you've been scammed. Seniors are common targets in real estate fraud," she added smoothly, pretending concern while feeding their scheme. The room grew tense as Michael clutched the key like it was evidence of my failure, not a gift of love. "This makes no sense, Dad," he pushed on. "A man your age shouldn't be making big financial decisions without family guidance." Jessica leaned in again, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Yes, Richard, this looks troubling. You may not realize it, but you've probably been taken advantage of." Their words, so condescending, made my stomach turn. But I kept calm, knowing the right moment to reveal the truth was drawing near. The guests shifted uneasily, exchanging worried glances. My brothers, George and Joseph, looked stunned at Michael's hostile reaction to such an extraordinary gift. "Son," George finally said, trying to stay calm, "your father just gave you a condo worth nearly $500,000. Maybe you should thank him before questioning his judgment." But Michael was far past reason. Backed by Jessica's support, he seized the moment to attack my competence in front of everyone. "Uncle George, you don't understand," Michael snapped. "Dad has been slipping for months. He forgets important appointments. He gets lost in familiar places. Sometimes he doesn't even recognize people. He isn't capable of handling something this serious." Jessica, seeing her chance, quietly tapped her phone to start recording, her eyes gleaming with calculation. "We've been worried about his financial safety for a long time," she added in a tone of fake concern. "This rash purchase only proves what we feared." That was the moment I decided it was time to end their charade. I rose slowly from my chair, walked to the hutch, and returned with a thick folder of documents. I placed it firmly on the table. "Here's the paperwork, son," I said with authority. "The deed, title insurance, purchase contract, inspection reports, all legitimate and reviewed by my lawyer." Jessica's confidence faltered as she scanned the papers, her face paling. "As you can see," I continued, steady and clear, "my mind is perfectly sound. I researched multiple properties, negotiated the deal, secured the financing, and signed everything after careful review. These are recent, official, legally binding documents. Every page proved my capacity. Fresh signatures, verified clauses, all completed without error. And the condo is titled in your name, Michael. No liens, no conditions. It's fully yours." But instead of relief, I saw panic flicker in his eyes. The truth hit me in that moment. This gift didn't secure his loyalty. It destroyed his entire plan. Because if I had the clarity to buy a $450,000 condo just weeks ago, then their story about my supposed incompetence would collapse in front of any judge. The gift I once meant as love had now become the very weapon that tore their scheme apart. Michael's face twisted with desperation. "But Dad," he began, his voice rising, trembling, as he struggled to hold onto the narrative that was slipping through his fingers. "I don't want this condo. I have no use for it." "Why didn't you ask me first?" Michael snapped. His reaction was so absurd that even the most polite guests began exchanging uneasy, judgmental looks. "You could sell it and recover the money," my cousin Emily offered reasonably. "Or rent it out for income. It's a valuable asset." But Michael shook his head furiously, as if owning property was some kind of curse. Then, in a burst of rage, he completely lost control. "You call this a present?" he roared, jumping to his feet and snatching up the cardboard box that once held the key. "After everything we've done for you, this is what you give us? Worthless trash." His voice thundered through the house like an explosion. The guests froze in disbelief, stunned to see a grown man shouting at his elderly father for giving him nearly $500,000 in real estate. "You're hopeless at giving gifts," he shouted again, lifting the box high. You've always been a senile old fool who doesn't understand what people actually need." The venom in his words was so raw that several guests gasped out loud. My brother Joseph instinctively stepped toward me to protect me, but I remained seated, calm and steady, waiting for the breaking point I knew was coming, and then it happened. Michael hurled the box straight at my face with shocking force. The cardboard struck my left cheek, then fell to the floor, skidding under the dining table. The silence that followed was total, as if time itself had stopped so everyone could process the horror of what they had just witnessed. My own son had physically attacked me, his elderly father, in front of 20 witnesses, for the crime of gifting him a $450,000 condominium. I slowly touched my cheek, where the box had landed, feeling only the faint sting of reddened skin. But inside, I felt no pain. Instead, I was overcome with absolute clarity, a release from guilt, a freedom from doubt. Michael had shown his true self to everyone. He had proven who he really was the moment he didn't get what he wanted, and I knew then I would never again need to explain or justify the choices I was about to make. The silence that lingered afterward was so heavy it swallowed every sound. The guests sat frozen like statues, struggling to comprehend the scene that had just unfolded before their eyes. My brother George was the first to react. He shot up from his chair, his face red with anger. "Michael, what have you just done?" he demanded, his voice trembling as he pointed at me, sitting with my hand pressed to my reddened cheek. "You struck your own father for giving you a gift worth $500,000. Michael stood frozen in the middle of the room, chest heaving, as if he had suddenly woken from a nightmare and realized the weight of what he had done. His eyes darted from face to face, searching desperately for support among the shocked guests, but he found none. Jessica reached for his arm, trying to calm him, but he pulled away violently, as if even her touch was betrayal. "You don't understand," he muttered in a broken voice. "None of you know how hard it's been dealing with his mental decline." "Mental decline?" My cousin Emily shot back in disbelief. "Richard just bought you a luxury condominium with all the proper documents, and you respond by screaming at him and striking him because you didn't like the gift?" Her voice rose with each word, fueled by the outrage spreading through the room. "The only one showing signs of instability here is you, Michael." A wave of murmurs rippled among the guests, confirming that the tide had turned completely against him. Meanwhile, Noah had risen quietly from his chair. With tears running down his face, he came to my side and knelt beside me. "Grandpa, are you hurt?" he whispered, gently taking my hand in his. His kindness stood in stark contrast to his father's violence, creating an image no one present would ever forget. "I'm so sorry for what Dad did," Noah said, his voice breaking. "You didn't deserve any of this." That was the moment I knew it was time to tell the truth. I stood slowly, holding on to my dignity despite the attack, and stepped to the center of the room so that everyone could see me clearly. "There is something very important you all need to know," I began firmly, my voice steady. "For months, Michael and Jessica have been planning to take legal guardianship of me so they can seize control of my home and force me into a nursing facility against my will." The words exploded into the silence like thunder. "That's a lie," Jessica screamed immediately, but her denial rang hollow, desperate, unconvincing, and already too late. "Richard is confused. He's imagining things that never happened," Michael said quickly, nodding frantically as he tried to hold on to the story slipping through his fingers. "Dad, you know we only want what's best for you. We'd never do anything like that." But his words were empty. After the violent scene everyone had just witnessed, no one was convinced. "I have proof," I said firmly, walking to the hutch where I kept my most important files. I pulled out a thick folder filled with photographs, transcripts, and records I had gathered over weeks of quiet investigation. "These are the photos Jessica secretly took of my belongings and papers," I said, holding them up for everyone to see. "And here are the transcripts of their conversation, where they discussed selling my house to a developer." Each page I revealed landed like another nail sealing their fate. The guests crowded around to examine the evidence, their faces shifting from confusion to shock as they realized the depth of betrayal. "This is unbelievable," my brother Joseph muttered, staring at the photographs. "Jessica, these are pictures of Richard's private property, taken without his consent. The images showed valuables, legal documents and personal spaces, all catalogued as if for a future auction. And here," I continued, lifting a small digital recorder Robert had given me, "are the audio files of their plan to put me away and demolish my house for profit." I pressed play. Michael's own voice echoed through the room. "The property will be ready in 60 days. Once we have guardianship, we can close the deal immediately." The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael and Jessica turned white as sheets, staring at the recorder as though it were a deadly weapon. "That clip is out of context," Jessica stammered desperately. "We weren't talking about Richard, we were talking about a TV show we watched." But even she didn't believe her own excuse. It sounded ridiculous, hollow. The evidence was overwhelming, clear, undeniable, impossible to escape. "Now you all see why Michael reacted so violently to the condominium," I said, my voice steady, addressing the stunned audience. "He wasn't angry about the gift. He was angry because it ruined his plan. What he wanted wasn't my generosity, it was my house, my money, my freedom. The condominium I bought proves beyond doubt that I am fully competent," I declared firmly, "and with that their entire guardianship plan collapses." The logic was undeniable, and everyone could now see how the pieces fit together. Noah stood frozen, his eyes locked on his parents, his face twisted with a disgust I had never seen in him before. "Is this true?" he asked in a trembling voice. "Were you really planning to take Grandpa's house and throw him in a nursing home?" Michael tried to step toward his son, but Noah instinctively pulled back, his body recoiling as if his own father had turned into a stranger. "Don't touch me," he whispered, his voice filled with pain. "I can't believe you're capable of something like this." The change in the room was immediate. What had begun as a birthday gathering now turned into open condemnation. Guests quietly shifted away from Michael and Jessica, as though betrayal itself might spread. George stepped to my side, his arm firm around my shoulders, his face filled with a disappointment I had never seen directed at my son. "Richard, I cannot believe your own child would plot something so vile," he said loudly, making sure everyone heard, "after all the sacrifices you made for him." Michael, now panicked, raised his voice, waving his arms wildly. "You're all wrong," he shouted. "We were only trying to do what's best for Dad. We wanted to protect him from scammers and people who prey on the elderly." But his words rang hollow. Every guest had seen the proof, and his excuse sounded rehearsed, false. Jessica said nothing. She stood staring at the floor, as if she wished she could sink through it and vanish. The neighbors whispered among themselves, their murmurs buzzing like angry wasps. "I always thought Michael was such a good son," Mrs. Parker said sadly. "But this is unforgivable." Others nodded, some even snapping quiet photos of the documents I had laid out, eager to keep evidence of what they had just witnessed. Noah had become the emotional heart of the moment. His young face seemed to age years in minutes as he processed his parents' betrayal. "Dad," he said finally, his voice shaking but steady with resolve, "how could you even think about doing this to Grandpa?" Then he turned toward me and gently took my hand, holding it with all the tenderness in the world. "Grandpa, I had no idea," Noah cried, his tears streaming down his face. "If I had known what they were planning, I swear I would have told you right away." Each tear carried the innocence and honesty of his young heart. "I know, son," I said softly, brushing his hair the way I had since he was a boy. "You were the only one who warned me. You're the only one in this family who still has honor." My words struck Michael harder than any evidence could. He clutched his chest as though the pain was physical. Watching his own son take my side hurt him more than every document and recording I had presented. Jessica tried one last desperate attempt to save herself. "Richard, you're mistaken," she said in a falsely sweet voice. "The recordings were misunderstood. We would never harm our own family." But before she could continue, my brother Joseph stepped forward, his face set with resolve. "Enough," he commanded sharply. "We've heard enough lies to last a lifetime. Leave this house now, before I call the police." The word police jolted Michael, his face twisted in panic. "You can't call the police," he shouted desperately. "We're family. We have rights." But his words sounded pathetic after everything that had been revealed. The only rights you have, my cousin Emily cut in coldly, are the ones Richard chooses to give you. And after what you've done trying to steal his home and freedom, you don't deserve even those. It was then that I finally made the decision I had put off for weeks. I walked to the old landline phone I kept for sentimental reasons and dialed the number I already knew by heart. "Robert," I said when he answered. "Yes, this is Richard. It's time to put the estate plan changes into effect." The room went completely still. Every guest understood the meaning of my call. "I want Michael and Jessica removed from my will," I continued, staring straight at my son. "All my assets, properties, and investments will go to my grandson Noah when he turns 25. Until then, everything will be managed through the trust you'll oversee." Each word landed like the strike of a hammer, crushing the last hope of Michael's inheritance. The reaction was instant and brutal. Michael fell onto the sofa, his hands covering his face, sobbing like a broken man. "You can't do this," Michael cried through his tears. "I'm your son. I'm your only son." But his pleas came far too late. He'd had decades to prove himself worthy of my trust and inheritance. Instead, he had chosen greed and betrayal. Jessica moved as if to interfere with my call to the attorney, but George and several guests stepped forward, creating a shield around me. "Don't even think about it," one of my cousins warned sharply. "You've already caused enough harm today." That wall of protection from family and neighbors was powerful. It showed that everyone present believed me completely and rejected Michael and Jessica's lies. Into the phone I added clearly, making sure the whole room could hear. "I want immediate protections put in place. No guardianship petition can move forward without the consent of at least 3 independent geriatric psychiatrists and a full court hearing." It was my final safeguard against any revenge they might attempt after losing access to my estate. When I hung up, I turned to Michael with a calmness that even surprised me. "The condominium I bought for you is still yours," I told him firmly. "It will be my last gift as your father. But from this moment on, you have no claim to my house, my assets, or my future." Tears ran down his cheeks as the weight of my words sank in. His fate was sealed. The days after that confrontation moved slowly, like frames in a film. But instead of chaos, there was peace, peace I hadn't felt in decades. Michael and Jessica tried again and again to reach me during that first week. Calls I ignored until voicemail. Texts I deleted without reading. Letters I threw straight into the trash without opening. Silence had become my strongest weapon, more powerful than any argument or angry word. Every afternoon, Noah came by after school, his heavy backpack slung over his shoulder, his shy smile lighting up the kitchen. "Grandpa," he said one day as we baked cookies together, "Mom cries at night. She says you're cruel for not speaking to her." I handed him a warm cookie and replied softly, "Silence, son, is sometimes the only dignified answer we can give. There are betrayals so deep they don't deserve words." 3 weeks after the birthday party, I received an unexpected visitor. Michael came alone, without Jessica. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his face marked by sleepless nights. He stood at my front door for a long time before knocking, as though he had to gather courage just to face me. When I finally opened the door, his eyes were red and swollen from crying. For a brief second, I saw the little boy of 8 who once clung to me for comfort after his mother abandoned us. But that fragile image vanished the moment I remembered what he had plotted against me. "Dad," he whispered hoarsely, "we need to talk." I stood in the doorway, refusing to let him inside, gripping the frame as though it were a shield. "There's nothing left to say, Michael," I answered coldly. "You said everything when you threw that box at my face in front of 20 witnesses." His tears spilled again, but they no longer touched me the way they once had. "I was confused," he sobbed. "Jessica convinced me it was best for you, that you really needed special care." He reached to touch my arm, but I pulled back instantly. "Please, Dad, forgive me. Put me back in your will. I'll take care of you like I should have." His words sounded rehearsed, like a speech practiced in front of a mirror. What pained me most was realizing his regret wasn't for betraying me, it was only for losing his inheritance. The condominium is still yours, I told him firmly. That $450,000 gift I gave when I believed you loved me is more than most fathers ever give their children in a lifetime. Michael shook his head violently, as if the condo were a curse instead of a blessing. I don't want the condo, he screamed. I want things back the way they were. I want to be your son again. But he had crossed a line he could never return from. Something inside me had broken forever, something no apology could repair. The months that followed brought me a peace I hadn't known since my youth. With Michael and Jessica gone, their manipulative shadows no longer haunting my home, the house became my sanctuary again. And when Noah turned 18, he officially moved in with me, filling the rooms once poisoned by betrayal with laughter and life. He studied business at the community college each morning, worked afternoons at a local bookstore, and still found time to sit beside me in the garden every evening as the sun went down. One October evening, while I was watering the roses that had bloomed so beautifully under my care, Noah brought me a certified letter. His face carried worry. "It's from Dad's lawyer," he said quietly. I opened it calmly. The words inside reeked of desperation from a man who had lost everything. Michael had sold the condominium I gifted him and spent the $450,000 hiring lawyers to fight the changes to my will. But Robert had prepared everything perfectly. My decisions were unshakable. "What does it say, Grandpa?" Noah asked as he sat on the porch swing. "It says your father has finally learned that actions have consequences," I replied, folding the letter neatly. He wasted the $450,000 on lawyers who couldn't help him. Now he has neither the inheritance nor the gift I gave him with love. That is justice I never even planned. Winter arrived gently, laying frost across the garden, making it look fresh and pure. Noah and I built quiet routines together, hot chocolate by the fire, evenings reading old books, long talks about life and true love. He told me of his studies, his dream to build a business, his plans for the future. I shared my own stories, decades of sacrifice, lessons learned, and the strength that comes from surviving betrayal. One January evening, while I was preparing my nightly tea, the phone rang. It was Jessica, her voice shaking. "Richard," she said, "Michael is in the psychiatric ward. He broke down completely after losing all the condo money." Her words reached me like a far-off echo, but they carried no power over me anymore. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely, "but those are the consequences of his own choices." I hung up and returned to my tea, feeling a deep peace, knowing I had done the right thing. Sitting in my recliner, I looked out at the frost-covered garden where the roses rested, waiting for spring. Noah studied in his room, his lamp casting a warm glow into the hall. My home was filled with real love at last, not the false affection I had tolerated for years. That night, before sleep, I wrote in my journal, "True love asks for nothing in return, but it cannot endure betrayal forever." For 40 years, Michael had my love and turned it into greed. Now Noah receives that love, and he honors it with gratitude. The circle is complete, and my heart is finally at peace. The years that followed were the happiest of my life. Noah graduated summa cum laude, married a kind young teacher, and gave me 3 grandchildren who filled the house with laughter. Michael tried to reconnect more than once, but I had learned that some doors must stay closed to protect the peace that was so hard won. I lived to 89, surrounded by genuine love, knowing I had made the right choices when they mattered most. And when I closed my eyes for the final time, it was with the smile of a man who lived with dignity until the very end. If you enjoyed my story, please support me with a super thanks. It will help me create many more stories like this one. And now tell me, what would you do in this person's place? Share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. If you'd like to hear more life stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Infidelity Tales Hub. Many more are waiting for you. A big hug, and until next time.